of the U.S. Department of Labor, a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute. She served as chief of staff on President George W. Bush's Council of Economic Advisors. She also served in the White House under George H.W. Bush and as an economist on the staff of President Reagan's Council of Economic Advisors. She's written a book called Regulating to Disaster: How Green Jobs Policies Are Damaging America's Economies. Diana, welcome to today's Issues.
It's great to be with you.
Diana, let me ask you a question right up front. Green jobs, we hear a lot about that today, but it seems to me that that term covers a lot of waterfront. What exactly is a green job anyway?
Well, it's difficult to describe what a green job is. The Labor Department has multiple categories of them, but it could be someone who makes green energy like solar and wind, but it could also be a plumber who's putting in a low-flow toilet, or a farmer who's growing ethanol, corn for ethanol, or someone in a Salvation Army store who's dealing with recycled goods. In fact, it's such a broad category that the Labor Department has decided to eliminate its count of green jobs because of the sequester, saving them $8 million a year.
So there's some kind of game being played here, isn't there, with how green jobs are being defined, how the category is being made so broad that billions of dollars can, almost anything it seems, could be justified in terms of government spending if you just attached green jobs to it somehow. Is that
exactly?
The case?
It's a very wishy-washy definition. So if someone makes a paper cup with an environmental message, such as save energy or don't litter, that worker has a green job. That same cup made without the environmental message, the people who make those cups do not have green jobs.
You know, we're told repeatedly that if we would just spend more to develop these green jobs, it would help the economy. It would, supposedly studies have shown it would bring down costs and there'd be many more jobs and it would be a great boost to the economy. But that's not really the case, is it?
It's really not, even though in his State of the Union address, President Obama again made a pitch for green technologies. They are more expensive and they raise people's utility bills. If you look at the cost of electricity made by solar and wind or biofuels, it's far greater than the cost made by natural gas. And we have so much natural gas now, it's at record low prices, around $3 per million BTUs, and we have it right here in our own ground. That is the wave of the future. But, you know, when they put these green energy incentives in place about 5 to 10 years ago, we didn't have all that natural gas. Well, we had it, but we didn't know how to get it out in such an inexpensive fashion. So times have changed, and we should change with it. We shouldn't be subsidizing a form of energy that's more expensive and it's going to raise people's utility bills.
Could you say something to us about Solyndra? I know you've got a chapter in your book about it. We're talking, by the way, with Diana Furchtgott-Roth, author of Regulating to Disaster, published by Encounter Books. I think we heard a lot in the lead up to the election about Solyndra, but give us the big picture. What was the promise there and what went wrong?
The promise was a new kind of solar technology, and Solyndra isn't the only company that's received funds that's gone bankrupt. $527 million was given to Solyndra at the particular request of Vice President Biden's staff because they wanted him to appear at a groundbreaking ceremony in September 2009. But there have been multiple other companies that have received grants that haven't done very well. There was just a report by the Inspector General of the Department of Energy talking about a company called LG Chem in Holland, Michigan, where it was reported that employees, rather than spending their time making electric batteries to go in electric vehicles, were spending their time playing games, watching video games, because there just wasn't enough demand for these batteries to go in the electric vehicles. So we find Beacon Power, we find Bright Source, we find many of these solar companies that have received grants from the Energy Department and subsidized loans such as Solyndra have not done very well afterwards. Some people say the government is good at picking winners and losers. Well, the winners get private investment. The losers are left to the government.
Your book is called Regulating to Disaster, How Green Jobs Policies Are Damaging America's Economy, published by Encounter. How do you get a copy of this?
You can just go to Amazon.com, and it costs about $15, and it makes a great present, great birthday present, anniversary present for all your favorite people. And it describes why the wave of the future in the United States is not green energy policies, but natural gas and fossil fuels.
What about coal? Where do we stand on that? Because the Obama administration sort of declared war on coal.
Right. The Obama administration has declared war on coal. They have put at least 100 coal-fired electricity plants out of business since January 2010. They're planning on putting the rest of them out of business too. So we are shipping our coal to China, which is using it to make less expensive goods. The fear is that the carbon emissions are going to increase global warming and hurt our environment. But we produce a small percentage of the carbon emissions of the world. Plus, if our coal is burnt in China or burnt here, it's the same amount of carbon emissions, same amount of global warming. So we're just cutting off our noses to spite our faces.
Why do we do stuff like that?
Because we have an ideology, because people have blinkers on. They believe in the religion of global warming, in the religion of climate change, even though a lot of evidence shows that it's not man-made, that we've had warming and cooling cycles for thousands and thousands of years.
But do you think the average I just don't think. Do you think the average American out there believes in this stuff, or is this mostly your elite politicians and academicians and people like that?
I think it's mostly the elite. There are many people like me who went to school and we were told the big danger was nuclear winter, global cooling. And those of us who went through that, now we hear the dangers global warming. I mean, we just don't believe any of these dangers. We just think the world's going to go ahead. And okay, if it's a couple of degrees warmer in a few years on a day like that, that seems a really good idea.
We had the commander of the one of the major commanders of the U.S. military the other day in the Western Fleet or something like that. You know what I'm talking about? He was saying that global warming is the most dangerous problem. Not Russia or China or anything like that. It was or North Korea. It was global warming. It was American. I wish I had his name. American general.
Probably he thought that was the best way to enhance his chances of getting promoted. In fact, the military, even though they're facing this dramatic sequester, they're having to spend $27.50 buying biofuels instead of $3.50 buying diesel or gasoline for some of their vehicles. They have this pilot project requiring them to spend millions on biofuels. It would be better if they could just give the money to our troops.
Talk to us a little bit about fossil fuels, which I think get pilloried, ridiculed, again, by certain aspects of the media and the government, as if we need to, as if we could possibly go to wind or solar and never have to use fossil fuels again. Yet you say in your book, I believe, that we ought to do more with fossil fuels.
We really should. There is nothing like an internal combustion engine powered by gasoline. These cars are getting more fuel efficient. They're getting a lot cleaner, and people don't want to drive electric cars. They have small range, and besides, they use a lot of electricity in order to fuel the batteries. If you plug the battery for the electric car into any kind of charging outlet, electricity needs to be generated in order for that battery to be charged. So the savings from electric vehicles in terms of emissions are not nearly as large as was thought. The new American energy revolution with hydrofracturing, getting natural gas out of the ground, is bringing back manufacturing plants to the United States, petrochemicals, even some steel plants, anything that benefits from low energy cost is going to be better off in the United States for the next 10 to 20 years and possibly thereafter. So that's a really exciting development. It's a bright spot in our economy. We need to be encouraging it. What's interesting is this hydrofracturing has come about on private lands rather than public lands. President Obama tries to take credit for our new production of natural gas and oil, but he's slowed permitting on federal lands so that we could get even more if he just liberalized his permitting process.
We're talking with Diana Furchtgott-Roth. She's the author of the book Regulating to Disaster, How Green Jobs Policies Are Damaging America's Economy, published by Encounter Books. Could you say a word about nuclear energy? That's been pushed off over to the side. Does nuclear power have a role to play in America's future?
I think nuclear power certainly does. It's a clean form of energy. It's used in many parts of the world. We have new nuclear plants now that are even beyond the designs in Japan, the ones that had problems during the tsunami. So the new designs of nuclear plants don't allow a cool down of the core, even if electricity is shut off. The problem is that the danger of litigation is keeping this form of energy off the market. Not so much the initial cost of building the power plant, but the possibility of its manufacturers getting sued. So until that changes, we are not going to have a lot of new energy from nuclear power, even though that I would think would be desirable.
Back to my, I was telling about one of the top U.S. commanders in the military had said that climate change / global warming was the greatest threat to the human race. It was a gentleman by the name of Admiral Samuel Locklear III, U.S. Pacific Command commander. I mean, this guy is right up there at the top, probably right under the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and the secretaries of the various divisions of our military. But he says this gentleman says according to this report in the Blaze, he was speaking at Cambridge, Massachusetts. He's a top officer in the U.S. Navy. I mentioned his name last week. He said the current atmosphere in the Pacific region of the world, and he's including in this North Korea's recent threats and potential conflicts with other countries, but he said that the most serious problem is climate change.
I would say the most serious problem is Iran, which is arming Hamas, arming Hezbollah, arming Syria, arming North Korea.
Yeah, but he says the ice is melting and the sea is getting higher. And quoting him, this is a U.S. Pacific commander, folks. He says, "I'm into the consequence management side of it. I'm not a scientist, but the island of Tarawa, Tarawa, I guess is how you pronounce it." He says they're contemplating moving their entire population to another country because it's not going to exist anymore. So he's bought into this idea that the polar ice caps are going to melt here before long and swallow a lot of the earth.
So apparently there's been more ice melting in the north and less ice melting in the south. But it's not clear that these are caused by man-made emissions. There have been cycles of cooling and warming for thousands and thousands of years. This has been documented clearly. It's not clear that America's contribution to emissions, we produce 16% of carbon emissions. Without China and India doing anything, we are not going to be able to make a difference. Right. China and India have indicated that they are not going to cut back on their emissions. So what nature does is often sad, it's often tragic, but it is not something that we need to slow economic growth to no avail, I would say. But one thing we could do is we could be doing something about what Iran is doing with its financial fingerprints all over the world, empowering other groups and countries to kill Americans and wage war on the United States.
Regulating to Disaster is the title of the book, How Green Jobs Policies Are Damaging America's Economy, by Diana, do you pronounce it Furchtgott?
Furchtgott-Roth, Diana Furchtgott-Roth.
And
yes,
last name,
thank you so much for having me on your program.
You're welcome, absolutely. And she served in